give a warm welcome to the hosts of The Bride of Alternate Ending.
Hello, ghouls and goblins, and welcome back to Bride of Alternate Ending. I am your co-host, Brennan Klein, and with me, as always, is your other co-host and mine, Tim Brayton. Hi, Tim. How are you?
I always appreciate being your other co-host. Thank you. How are you doing, Brennan?
I'm doing fine. It's so here's the thing. It's very cold where I am, and I'm sure it's about 30 to 40 degrees less cold than where you are.
You can just suck a dick, is what I have to say in response to that statement.
You know, that's fair. But I've been challenged. I live in what?
Okay, here's my comparison. Is there currently a form of water on the ground where you live, and is that form liquid or solid?
No, and neither.
Okay.
It did rain 2 days ago.
Oh no.
But yeah, no, it's like, hold on, let me check just so you can really viciously mock me the most. But yeah, it's 48 degrees right now.
Okay, that's legit cold.
Okay, great.
I will not give you shit for that. It is in the high 30s actually right now. It's a miserable, cold, rainy day, but it is also a rainy day and not a snowy day.
Interesting. So. Okay. Yeah, because I really have no frame of reference as to how to handle cold, but I live in an apartment with tile floors and no insulation, so I do feel like I'm in an icebox.
Well, I think that's actually like a legitimate thing, though, is, in Los Angeles, you are not equipped to deal with any quantity of cold, whereas in central Wisconsin, the infrastructure of the world is built around the winter. Not to the degree that it is in, like, Minnesota, but so we are prepped for it.
Yeah, I guess that is a slight point in my corner, thankfully. But yeah, I'm wearing long sleeves. It's the 1 week a year that I get to do this.
All right.
Very fun. But anyway, it feels perfect for a discussion about Christmas because Christmas.
It does. Christmas is the snowy holiday.
It is. But anyway, so we are doing our kind of not quite Christmas series about horror movies set on Christmas, but not necessarily about Christmas. This one is very much in that vein.
I will say, if you had not primed me, I might have missed where they established that it is Christmas.
Yeah, it is extremely subtle, and not because last time we did Night of the Comet, which has much more Christmas overtone and decoration to it than this one. Mm-hmm. But we couldn't not talk about the 2007 new French Extremity horror film Inside, directed by French names that I will not do great, yes. But I'll do.
Julien Maury and Alexandre Bustillo.
Yes, who also directed the prequel Leatherface, which isn't as good as Inside.
Which I regret to be the only film of theirs I have seen. I will spoil my thoughts briefly to say that I think this film is better than Leatherface.
Okay, so you gave Leatherface a 10 out of 10, so that...
Exactly. This is the best film. I hope when Sight and Sound regroups, they knock Jean Dielman out to give this other French language film its due.
Exactly. It'll be the first film by two directors to be at the number one
Exactly.
But yes, so I saw that in your Letterboxd review, you complained about the amount to which the movie's premise is spoiled by... IMDb and Letterboxd. So how are we going to start discussing it, or should we just put a spoiler tag here?
I don't think it's that the premise is spoiled. I think it is that the explanation for why the villain has decided, or for what the villain is choosing to do.
Okay.
To me, is what comes as a surprise about a third to halfway through the film if you hadn't been told by the IMDb and or Letterboxd.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
But the fact that it's a home invasion thriller and there's this weird lady hanging around being a silhouette and being spooky, that's fair game. That's the movie.
Yeah. Okay, great. So we'll get up to that, then we'll put a spoiler tag on it. But if you've seen literally any promotional material for Inside, you do know the premise of Inside.
Well, granting that, but I still wish I had.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so we meet Sarah, played by Alison Paradis, or something like that.
Probably paradis. But
Yeah, the S gets me in French. I never learned French.
I feel like for the first time the shoe is on the other foot, because every time we talk about anything that has to do with Spanish, I'm always like cowed by your ability to actually pronounce Spanish. And now I'm like, yeah, baby.
Yeah, no.
Let's talk about à l'intérieur.
Yeah, oui, oui. But see, I feel like I can give a stab at the names, like not in the way that I feel like I'm on much firmer footing than Carrie is.
That is fair.
But that's
you did not attempt to say like Alexandra Bustillo.
Yeah, exactly. But
yeah,
Spanish and German are my core competencies as far as pronouncing foreign languages. But yeah, so this is a Dimension Extreme distribution picture.
I'm sure in my life I've seen a Dimension Extreme horror picture, but when I started this movie and up come the Dimension logos, first there's always that like little frisson of like, remember when Dimension could release movies before Harvey's naughtiness was discovered? So there's that, but then when it like, you get the Dimension logo and then like Extreme like zooms in and like shakes as it hits the Dimension logo, and it's like, oh, fuck this.
Oh,
I don't have enough Mountain Dew in my body to deal with this right now.
It's the most 2007 thing that has ever existed.
It's so 2007. Really got me like off on the wrong foot with this movie, because I was like, oh, what sort of deranged fuckery am I about to get into? And it is deranged fuckery, but not that kind.
Yeah, not Dimension Extreme deranged fuckery. It's one of those like lucky breaks where a kind of shitty American label just picks up something foreign that's really good.
Exactly.
Like, if I'm not mistaken, Troma put out Spirited Away in the U.S. originally.
I don't think it was Spirited Away. There was a...
Oh, was it like Princess Mononoke or something?
It might have been Totoro or something.
Something like Troma got their hands on a Studio Ghibli picture.
They did, yeah.
And this is that. But yeah, so Sarah is super duper pregnant. She lost her husband 4 months ago in a car crash. You get the sense, it's the first 10 to 15 minutes of this are just her being French, having ennui and staring at things.
And the car crash, when we see it, is shot in this very like vivid, like you clearly know what happened. There's no mystery about that really, but it's sort of dreamy, and it feels like it's in this kind of like isolated landscape where there's nothing but like the crashed car and like the bodies within it, and very clearly like sort of meant to be her sort of foggy memories of what happened.
Yeah, and
very striking.
And I guess yes, that's very striking. Although I guess I should say the opening salvo of the car crash is that we see how a CGI fetus on the inside of a pregnant stomach deals with the car crash.
You know, I made the decision very early on that I was going to accept the CGI fetus as what they had to work with in 2007 in France. And I forgive the movie. It's inordinately dumb-looking baby.
Yeah, you do. And thankfully it really only pops its head up every...
As it were.
Yeah, exactly. Every maybe like 5 or 6 significant times in the movie for not very long.
Yeah, which is a lot of times for something that looks this bad.
Yeah, it's like an Ally McBeal episode.
It is shocking. It is weird. It is what makes this a new French Extremity movie, to be like, you're now inside the womb. As this woman's body is getting shaken, you're seeing her baby being shaken within her womb. And it's like, okay, this is... Again, I allow it. You're trying to do something, and this is the best you could do given the state of the technology available to you.
Yes.
I admire that.
Absolutely. But yeah, everything else about the crash looks very cool. But anyway, yes, so she lost her husband. It's actually a kind of similar setup to the Babadook, where it's like her husband's dead. She's, not happy about it. Not really, you're getting the sense, not super happy that she's having a baby in general. Which
it's hard to say whether she's not happy about the baby because the husband died and she survived a car crash, or whether she never quite wanted the baby. But yes.
Yeah, they don't. It's not a character study, really.
Not really. Although it sort of presents itself as one to start, which is I think what's interesting about it.
Yeah, it's not like these aren't like paper thin characters, but they're just kind of like the meat and gristle upon which the thing the movie is doing is built on.
It's interesting to me because what it feels like for that opening 10 or 15 minutes or so, it truly does feel like it's kind of pulling at this like thread of French art cinema, European art cinema, like that slow cinema style, where it feels like what we're going to get is we're never going to have, a Hollywood style moment where we like learn about the character. Like she's not going to have a monologue where she tells us how she's feeling, but we are going to spend so much time just kind of like hovering around her, watching how she behaves with her depression and her sort of pre-partum melancholy. Like that's the vibe it's kind of teasing at. Like we're gonna spend time watching her and sort of absorb what she's feeling, even if we never can quite hear her articulate that or know quite where it's coming from. Which of course I think is a deliberate fake out in a way, because that's not what this is. This is not a slow cinema film. This is not a slow cinema podcast. But I do think it's at least sort of allowing you to read the opening act that way.
Yeah, it is. It is a little bit of a switcheroo, especially because, or a bait and switch is the phrase I was reaching for there. In the same way that The Bird starts out as a screwball romantic comedy until the first bird swipes down at Tippi Hedren, and then it just kind of goes full tilt into screaming madness.
Exactly.
Yeah, because Inside, this is not to say that Inside is boring in any way, but it does have a very deliberate first act, a slow boil before it kind of reaches that, the whistling kettle of what's actually going on.
Well, go ahead.
No, yeah. What were you saying?
Well, I was going to say, like, I think what's interesting about it is when it does begin to make that switch and it starts to decide, actually, I'm a horror film now. It does so just kind of smoothly. Like, there's not a moment where she's, like, putting around and all of a sudden, like, there's this like, crazy violin sting on the soundtrack. It's almost like she's dealing with her depression, her sadness, her isolation, and there's also just, like, this weird figure outside her house. And it's kind of treated weirdly matter-of-factly at first. It's not like you are invited to recognize immediately that you are about to start watching a slasher movie.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because it's definitely, because there is obviously a level of tension in the first act that isn't horror tension. It's just this prickly way that she's relating to the people in her life, both strangers and the people that she knows and that love her or employ her. But like there's this moment where she encounters a nurse who's just yammering on about her first kid and how horrible and painful it was to have a kid.
Oh my god, that scene was really fucking good, I thought.
Oh yeah. It's really good, and it's brutal and it's tense, but it's not a horror sense. It's not a horror scene. So it is kind of that frog slowly being boiled in a pot of like the tension kind of transforms more into horror. It slides down the scale into horror.
Exactly.
But yeah, so it is Christmas Eve. She has a plan to be picked up by her boss in the morning and driven to the hospital to induce labor. I think they're planning on doing a C-section, right?
I mean, I assume that is what the implication is. The situation, as I understand it, she is overdue to a degree that is now becoming a medical concern.
Yes.
And so C-section most likely is what they're going to try and do here.
Yeah, so they're going to make her have this baby on Christmas Day. It's Christmas Eve. She's at home alone purposefully. Her mom invites her out. Her boss invites her out. And she does not want to be anywhere. She just wants to be, pregnant and miserable and working in her photographic darkroom because she's a photographer. But outside of the sliding glass door of her living room, well, do we see that first, or is it the knock on the door first?
I think it's the knock on the door first.
Yes.
If I recall.
Yeah, there's a knock on the door. A woman shows up asking for help. Her car broke down on the corner. There's also this other through line of this kind of war on terror era rioting in the streets that's going on throughout Paris. Like the police are kind of trawling around the city and kind of trying to stop this just tension in the streets. There's the sense that there's violence in the air.
And it's like, it's sort of getting back to the French art film of it. Like, you can tell that she wants to be out there covering this story, and she's really upset that her state is, like, forcing her to be bedridden, essentially. So that's like, it sort of adds to the character tension in that way as well.
Yeah, exactly. So there's just this altogether just this weird vibe in the air, and the woman's basically saying like, I need to use your phone. I'm afraid out here because of all the violence in the streets. And she's like, no, I won't let you in, quite reasonably. But then the woman outside the door reveals that she knows more about this woman and her name and her backstory than a stranger should, I would say.
Indeed. There's that incredible moment, which is one of the places where I feel like that thing I was getting at, where like this film doesn't announce itself as horror. The mysterious woman, who is only credited as the woman La Femme, is a sort of like conventional, way that you dissuade strangers from knocking at your door. I forget what exactly Sarah says, but it's something like, my husband is asleep right now. I don't want to let anyone, or something. Yeah. She references her husband.
She says he's already gone to bed.
And the woman says, I know that's not true. Your husband is dead.
Yeah, and she says, your husband is dead, Sarah.
That's right. And the way it's played, like, it's not played for, like, dun, like, it's not like a scare moment, which I think is what makes it work better for me as tension, is it just kind of happens, and you're like, oh, wait, fuck? What did she just say?
Yeah. Yeah, it does, it's this very subtle, like I said, this subtle tilt, and then, of course, she's, the La Femme, she's played by Beatrice Dahl. She shows up in this glorious kind of like corseted black angel of death dress that I love. And she just shows up as this silhouette outside that sliding glass door in her living room. You see this brief flash of her face and incredible cheekbones as she lights a cigarette just standing outside. I
loved that shot so hard. And I know that I'm an easy mark for that kind of trick, but that's when we see her face for the first time. She's lighting a match, her face keeps like glowing, she's lighting a lighter. I that fucking shot just completely did me in. And I also think it helps Beatrice Dahl has such an incredible face. She's just interesting to look at. And not like interesting in a euphemism for like her face is lumpy or misshapen. She just has an interesting face. I like it.
Yeah, very much.
And seeing it just kind of flicker up in these like brief flashes of bright yellow light is just a really remarkable horror image.
It's really remarkable. And this whole sequence is beautiful. It's really well lit. There's this moment where, she's ramping up the ways that she is menacing Sarah. There's a point where she punches the glass door and leaves a crack behind. And then it's raining outside, and you see this little drop of water kind of worm its way through the crack. Of just like this sense of like the outside can come inside and you are not safe from it. And then, of course, she calls the cops. The cops come in. The woman, you can assume, sneaks in through the door that the cops left wide open. And then there's this shot where Sarah's kind of falling asleep, and there's just this kind of like fuzzy, indistinct darkness behind her that starts to resolve into the outline of the dress that the woman is wearing. She has a very cool Michael Myers shot where she's standing in the doorway and her face slowly disappears.
Yes. Definitely a movie that... Well, we'll get there, I'm sure. But a lot of good cinematography here. A lot of really thoughtful ways to use kind of the qualities of lighting to create those places of like tension and fraughtness. And once it starts, like this movie just goes. Like it does not untighten for even the span of like a single break the tension style joke. It just ratchets and ratchets and ratchets until you are in the last scene and you are choking to death.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I guess I'll put up the spoiler flag here where if you haven't been convinced to watch it already and you're like, fuck it, you can keep listening. We're going to spoil it, though. Does that sound right? Does that sound good?
That sounds fair. I think we've taken the plot synopsis as far as we can. And this, to me, by the way, at this point, I'm fully into the movie. Like, we don't... Well, again, I knew what was going on with the goddamn synopsis. But just this, like... This sort of way that this French art film has just sauntered into becoming a home invasion thriller and a very artfully crafted home invasion thriller. So it's not like it's a grungy movie, but at the same time, it's a grungy movie made with just a ton of care and delicacy, and again, all of these amazing, amazing shots. So I'm on board with it at this point. I have already committed myself to no chance in hell does this movie get less than a 3.5 for me. In fact, in the end, it got a 4 from me.
I am truly honored. I'm so glad.
But yes, and so at a certain point, we do learn why the woman is doing this, other than just pure malice.
Yes, and I would say that is the turning point of the film's plot, where everything kicks into high gear and does not let up from there.
I agree, which is part of the reason why I somewhat regret that it is like front and center in every plot synopsis.
Yeah, which is a bummer, but yeah. So basically, Sarah goes to sleep. The woman is just kind of fucking around, looking in drawers and just kind of poking around her house, and yeah, because there is more of that mystery of like, what the fuck is she doing? Until she shows up in the bedroom with the most fabulously designed pair of scissors, just this kind of architectural pair of giant scissors that she dips into alcohol and kind of traces up the belly of the woman and puts in her belly button, and you're like, she wants that baby.
Yep.
Yep. And the second she makes contact and pierces the belly button and blood kind of drools down this pregnant belly, that's when Sarah wakes up and the pas de deux starts.
Exactly. It is. I think here that the movie transitions from being a thriller to a horror film. We now do start to have clarity. Oh, this woman is going to extract and steal the fetus. Probably at no good end to Sarah.
Very much so.
And it's. I mean, that is. I have never been, and for fairly straightforward reasons, shall never be pregnant with a child. But that is as indescribably horrifying a body horror concept as I think it is possible to come up with.
Yeah, and it's so visceral. Like, and there's a lot of blood and a lot of gore in this movie, but the piercing of the belly button is like definitely one of the most impactful moments.
In some ways, even though it is such a small moment compared to what comes after, it is maybe one of the most upsetting, because we haven't really been warmed up into it. It just like, boom, there it is.
Yeah.
And it is, it's so non-garish that you can like really easily sort of analogize it onto your own body and like, oh, that would feel awful to have someone needling me in the belly with scissors. So it really, even hearing you describe it, like I kind of was like squirming up my body a little bit, because it's good. It's good.
Yeah, it's good shit. Yeah, so basically the rest of the movie is well, essentially Sarah spends most of the movie barricading herself in her bathroom. And basically trying to find a way to escape or defeat this woman in some way, while various people wander into her house looking for her and just get utterly demolished by this woman.
Yes.
Yeah, the various people, her mom and her boss both arrive. When she called the cops earlier, they sent a patrol to check up on her a little bit later, so there's 3 cops and what I presume to be a Muslim young man that they have imprisoned. And I think that's kind of everyone who wanders in, right?
That feels like the list of people. Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, and just a lot of violent mayhem ensues as Sarah tries to escape or get someone to notice that she is trapped who can help or anything.
Yep.
And yeah, so that's where we are with this. So you've already kind of said like you enjoyed watching this movie. I'm glad that you did. Once it makes that turn into the thing that it will be for the rest of its the remainder of its 82-minute runtime, perfect runtime.
Oh man. When I saw that runtime, I was like, ooh, Brennan picked a good one.
Thank you. Do you feel like that shift? You still were liking what the movie does, or do you feel like you preferred the pre-shift moment?
I like them both. I think the second half works because of how much it feels like it's violating what the first half was doing. I think you need it all. I think it's a package.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even though this movie makes such a hard turn, it's not like an audition type movie where it feels like the second part of it is in some way a different movie than the first part. It feels like it's just this kind of sweep that just brings us into darker and darker territory from start to finish, basically.
Yeah, very much. And
so I think the whole thing is good.
I'm so glad. And yeah, I mean, just as a violent motion picture, like the bloodshed is incredibly like artistically arrayed and impactful, because it's still like as a gore hound, you're like, holy fucking shit, that's really cool to look at, but it's also brutal and horrifying and and on a character level, like especially probably one of the coolest gags is Sarah is she has armed herself with this chopstick kind of thing that is sharpened. I'm not 100% sure what like hair implement it might be or whatever.
Some sort of hat pin or whatnot.
Yeah,
that kind of thing. Like something to hold one's bun in place.
Oh, yeah, something like that. But yeah, so she thinks that she is hearing La Femme approaching the door, and she opens the door and stabs that woman through the neck, and it turns out it's her mom, who she has just stabbed through the neck with this giant pin, and the pin gets pulled out, and just that artery just starts, like, Tenebrae style, spraying blood all down the hallway. And so that combines the like very fun, gushy blood gore effect with the just horrifying implications of the act that she has committed.
Exactly.
And the movie is just like that. That's the thing that it's doing.
I mean, I have seen simultaneously, I feel like I've seen more French Extremity than like the average Joe on the street, because the average Joe on the street has probably seen none. But I've seen enough to like feel like I have a handle on it, while also not having seen enough to feel like I know the new French Extremity. Like, I'm not an expert by any means, but I do feel what it's doing, or one of the things that it's doing, is it is trying to be both extremely detailed in the way that, like, your Fangoria type viewer, you're like, I'm here because I want to see awesome gore effects, is going to feel amply sated. You take a film like this, you take a film like Martyrs, like, you will come, and the part of you that likes seeing really amazing gore effects will have no complaints. At the same time, it never gives you the release, right? Like, you watch any slasher film, or even a lot of torture films, there's always that moment of, like, it almost plays as a joke. Like, it's so grotesque, it's so over the top, it's so, like, just garish and tasteless that you're kind of like, you're not being invited to feel that this is a horrifying thing. You're meant to feel like this is a gross thing, a cool thing, an awesome thing.
Yeah, like let's say Friday the 13th Part 3, when Jason crushes that guy's head and his eyeball pops out at the camera.
Exactly. Like, on the one hand, you can certainly think to yourself, boy, that would hurt a lot if my eyeball were popped out of my head because my head was being squeezed like one of those Cupid dolls. But it's still a joke, right? You're still meant to, like, cheer when he does that. My experience with the new French Extremity movies is that they don't give you access to that. They're so focused on, like, the corporeality. That was a terrible pronunciation of that word. The corporeality of just, like, the damage being done to these bodies, and, like, and the moment you point it is so perfect, because it's as much as it is about, like, oh wow, that's a cool arterial spray, it's like, oh my god, she just killed her mother.
Yeah.
Like, that is a horrifying thing. The woman who was going to save her, and also her mother, who, what little bits of interaction we've seen between them, their relationship seems good. Like, obviously Sarah's relationships with other humans right now are weak, but the mother seems kind. Like, there's that level of just kind of trauma, basically. It's really hard, dark horror to watch in a lot of ways, and I feel like this is, in that respect, again, I'm not an expert, but this is probably the most I've, like, clicked with a French Extremity film.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's a way to express this or not, because I feel like of what I've seen, like, inside, while it is unrelenting and brutal, it doesn't feel like it hates you.
No, I could rewatch this movie and likely will in a way that I truly don't think I'm ever going to rewatch Martyrs.
Yeah, or even Attention, High Tension. High Tension is just a mean, gross movie.
It is just vicious and cruel, and it does, as you say, hate you.
Yeah, and I think yeah.
Or even some of the ones that are sort of new French Extremity that we don't necessarily think of as horror films, like this or that film by Michael Haneke, where he's not French, but like Gachet isn't French, or Irreversible, the Gaspar Noé film. Those are like Irreversible is a movie that wants you to just feel like your face is being scraped up and down a concrete floor. Like, this is not that.
Yeah, because it while everything that happens on screen is, it's cruel and dark, and it's not there's no light at the end of the tunnel in this movie, but also the way that it kind of frames it as this kind of tete-a-tete of two people facing off, and the ways that it engages with the kind of thriller home invasion aspects of it, I think provide more of an engine for you to be enjoying the process in some way. Does that?
Yeah, and I mean, I think enjoying needs to go in scare quotes, but it is closer to being, again, I will watch this film again. I will not watch, I shouldn't say I will not. I would probably watch this film multiple times before I rewatch, again, Martyrs.
Yeah, exactly. So it's doing that. That's not to say it's softer than those movies, but it maybe has more on its mind and has more to offer.
Its genre framework gives it a way to be watchable.
Yes.
And I mean, obviously High Tension has a genre framework as well, but it is not punishing. This film is not punishing.
Yeah, exactly. Which is weird. It's hard to find the exact like level, like a gradation of tone that it's doing, but it's doing it perfectly.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, like as I go over it, like I would be very hard to like use. Like I couldn't point to the thing that our film directors have done that Alexandre Aja did not do, or that he did that they're not doing. Like I can't tell you mechanically why this film is not horribly unpleasant and High Tension is, but I can tell you that it is the case.
Yeah, exactly. And this, part of it probably has to do with the fact that this is a beautiful movie in very many ways, and I think that a lot of the French Extremity movies are so intent on being ugly, which is an aesthetic goal to have. But inside it is just such a well constructed movie. Like it's showing you ugly things in an ugly way sometimes, but the way that the movie is constructed is so just preternaturally confident and exciting. Like just the mere fact of like the way that blood is spread up and down the hallway, and then you're seeing Beatrice Dahl just kind of stalk her way through these patches of blood. It looks fucking cool and
it
beautiful.
Does. It is. And, I don't think we're quite ready to give away what happens at the end of this movie, if indeed we will ever be ready to give away what happens at the end of this movie. But the last couple of scenes do the thing you're doing. Like, there's a particular way that blood is staged very near the end of the film that is both the most horrific thing I can imagine, but there's a kind of almost giallo-esque, like, poetry to what it is. Yes. And the last couple of scenes, which are truly indescribably horrific, but the way they're shot and blocked has this kind of aesthetic glory to it, in the same way that, like, if you look at one of those really horribly distressing, like Hieronymus Bosch or some of the other people who do that kind of like nightmare apocalypse painting from like the 18th and 17th century, like there's that same level of what you've shown me is beyond description and how just evil it feels, but also pictorially you've done something incredibly striking, and just like the graphic qualities of what you've done are really pleasurable in that sense.
Yeah, it's constantly striking that balance, and I think we'll spend a little time talking about, like, especially that final scene a little bit later. Yeah, okay, I wanted to talk about outside of the violence, there's a lot of like intentional and artful imagery here, especially as relates to yonic imagery, which is the opposite of phallic imagery, and then also just the constant like visual motif of the womb, outside of literally showing the Ally McBeal baby. Like the
I mean, the film is called Inside, which is a double meaning. It is inside the house, but also inside her vag.
Exactly. But also, like, the bathroom that she locks herself in is very womb-like. When you see the exterior of the house, it's this one window with a light on inside this giant kind of blank roof. It's this sense of being engulfed in this thing that is larger than you. But I was wondering, with all of that, plus, like, the kind of war on terror motif going on, do you feel like there is a consistent or, like, coherent theme outside of violence is gross and we're doing this to the body?
I don't want to say no, because like I feel like you have someplace you want to take that, so I don't want to be like, no, there's not. I think my feelings about it, and I'm happy to hear counter arguments. The war on terror thing almost feels like it's just kind of an available backdrop. Like, this film was made in 2007. It's just there in the world. Like, people are protesting that war, especially in Europe. I think that it creates this sense of, like, charged everything is violent because everything is just shitty. That works. But I do feel like that, to a certain extent, is just getting us into the story. And as far as, like, the house feeling like a womb and the bathroom feeling like a womb within that, I think you're right, but I don't think they're doing it in a Freudian way. I think they're just doing, like nests within nests. So the baby is in her womb, and she is in the bathroom, and the bathroom is in the house, and the house is this kind of bulwark against the outside world. So I think it's less that there's, like... I mean, there's certainly not, like, a feminist reading of this film, I don't think.
No.
And that's not, like, I think they're really thinking about it more in sort of, like, this kind of structures. Like, each of those, like, protective structures is violated one at a time as this kind of, like, increasingly tense, getting towards the point where the woman wants to steal Sarah's baby out of her body.
Yeah,
So that would be my feeling about it. But, like, if you have something more detailed than that, I don't want to.
No, I think that's a really good way of laying it out, because I was sitting there watching the movie again and taking my notes and just thinking about it and thinking about, like, is there a roadmap I can construct out of all of these kind of different impulses and images into some sort of, like, very specific thing that the movie is saying? And I don't think I reached an answer to that. And that's not to say that the movie had to do that. But it has enough, like, kind of building blocks there that I wanted to try to arrange them and see kind of where I could get.
And I mean, absolutely, beyond a shadow of a doubt, like, there are bodies, as it were, of scholarship that are all about, like, movies as sort of, and I'm going to just start whipping out academic language that makes me feel like a real scuzzball to say, but like, movies as sites of violence being done on female bodies and things like that. Like, a scholar in that area could absolutely go to town with this film, but I don't think they're doing anything purposeful with it. I don't think they're using this film to, like, stake a claim about the body other than your body would hurt if someone did this to it. Yeah. Which is kind of standard issue horror cinema in a way.
I think the closest I could get to something that I would be, like, totally comfortable laying at the film's feet as far as a thesis is this kind of exaggeration and exteriorization of the fear of childbirth. Like, the thing that is inside you, your insides are going to become your outsides, and it's going to be bloody and painful, and we're going to just turn that up to 11, and this is the movie.
I think there's definitely something to that. I don't think they lean into it, because I think the thread where she sort of clearly doesn't want to be having this baby gets buried, I think. Like, it turns so much into this cat and mouse thriller that I don't know where there'd be room for, like, oh, she's stabbing at my door with these scissors, and also I have complicated feelings about motherhood. You can't tell that story without just stopping the film cold to, like, dwell in those moments. But I do think it's not foregrounding that after the opening 10 or 15 minutes or so. So it's both kind of gets buried, but also, again, not to talk around the movie, I think it's playing with imagery that leads to what you just said.
Okay, cool.
Shall we say?
Yeah. And yeah, that's the thing. I think I don't think it's like a consistent. This movie does not have a consistent thesis other than being thrilling and intense and beautiful, and it doesn't need to.
I just want to. I'm trying to find a way to say this is a movie that definitely agrees that it would really be daunting and harrowing to have to go in for a cesarean section.
We can just,
which is why I think when you asked about that, yes.
Let's just.
Well, again, we've seen that she's poking the belly with the scissors. That gets us in that direction.
Yeah. Okay, let's wave the spoiler flag. Let's talk about it because you really want to talk about it.
I do. That shot was like what made the movie for me. I was at a 3.5 stars, a good, enthusiastic 3.5 stars, and then that shot happened. I was like, "Oh, this is a 4-star movie."
Yeah, and you're talking about the final.
I'm talking about the shot pointing down at her body as she's dead on the stairs. The camera panning over. We see that the child has been carved out of her, and there's just this like ruined abdomen. She's covered in blood. She's like. Her top half is recognizable, her bottom half is recognizable, but in the middle there's just this like Thanksgiving turkey carcass where her uterus used to be. So we are seeing this like horrible parody of a cesarean section, which is why I think going back to what you're saying when you asked, do I think that she's getting a cesarean section, I don't think they clarify that, but I think that's what we have to assume because that's what gives that final shot. It's just kind of morbid, ironic charge. She got one.
Yeah, she sure did.
And that's like the sick joke of the movie. She didn't want a cesarean section, but she sure fucking got one.
Yeah, no, that's a really sick thing about it. But then also, I think what you were talking about with that kind of like giallo-esque imagery, you do see some of the extraction of the baby, but not all of it. But I think
just enough so that you know where it's going, and then the movie almost sort of tastefully backs off.
Tastefully is
Weirdly.
a strong word.
Tastefully is a word that only would make sense in context, I think.
Yeah, but I think for me it's more effective because it kind of cuts to the bottom of Beatrice Dahl's feet, and you see this waterfall of blood pouring down the stairs.
Mm-hmm. Which is exactly what I was sort of referring to.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a gorgeously Baroque sequence. It feels gross. Just
and when I say tasteful, you and I could both imagine and have probably both seen a version of this scene where Beatrice Dahl reaches into her body and starts pulling the baby out. It doesn't show us that. That would just be sick. What it shows us is, I think, much more sort of artful and powerful and kind of, again, gets at this, like, this is some sort of sick, dark nightmare version of actual childbirth.
Yeah, and I think that's the exact line of where the movie's not crossing it to be this miserable, unpleasant slog. Exactly. And it consistently makes those choices to just be a movie that is watchable in some capacity by some people.
Exactly.
Because, I mean, I showed this to my sister a couple years ago, and she still hasn't forgiven me.
I mean, I wouldn't show this movie to any woman. I gotta be honest.
Yeah, well, look, I didn't, like, sit her down and be like, hey, you had to watch Inside. It's like, I was watching Inside, and she was like, can I come? And I was like, sure.
I just like the thought of, like, your sister being like, hey, guess what, I'm pregnant. And you're like, ooh, I know the perfect movie for us to watch.
No, she's not pregnant, has not had a baby, but it's still, like, you know, it's a difficult pill to swallow.
Yeah.
Anyway, so...
Speaking of Giallo imagery...
Yeah?
One last thing about that last couple of because it doesn't end on the shot of Sarah, but the crying blood, too much or just right?
Wait, like is
we see a streamer of blood like leave her tear duct and just kind of roll down her face as she's lying there.
Oh, I think that's fine.
I mean, if you didn't even necessarily notice it, it is clearly not too much. I was undecided if I thought it was too much or just right.
Yeah, okay, and to be totally clear, I mean, this is like my third or fourth time seeing this film, but I did watch it just over a week ago because that's how the timing worked out for me. So like on a shot by shot memory level, I maybe just forgot that I saw that.
That is fair. I would say that there are shots which it is, generally speaking, easy to imagine forgetting, and shots where I found them far too striking to imagine that I will forget them anytime soon. But
yeah, no, it's there's so much in this movie.
Oh yeah. It's a very much movie. It's an extreme movie.
It is, and we haven't talked about, nor should we really dwell on the manifold ways that other people are dispatched in this film, other than to say that they're gory and gross and fun.
And I do think that's the thing. Those are the moments where the film is getting a little bit closer to just a slasher movie. Ooh, that's cool.
Uh-huh.
In a way that I think it needs something, because it can't do that between Sarah and the woman.
No.
Like, that needs to be treated with absolute gravity at all times. But it is going to kind of give us some level of outlet, even though I think there's never a death where I'm like, yeah, in the way that I am when Jason Voorhees like ties that guy's head to the tree and tightens it, and screws it. There's none of that in this movie. But there are, I think, some very good deaths. I particularly liked the cop who gets... Was it the cop or the young Muslim man? I think it was the cop who gets stabbed in the head with the scissors.
It's the young Muslim man, because then he, like, kind of looks around and pulls them out like he's kind of almost been lobotomized.
Yes.
Yeah, that's him. The cop, I think, gets his eyes poked out or something, and he kind of briefly becomes a zombie almost.
Yes. The point being, this is very much doing the slasher film where it's easier to remember the death scene than the narrative context or the hopes and dreams of the person who has been killed in that death
Yeah, a
scene.
little bit. Yeah, that sequence of the 4 people from the cop car coming into the house, it's like, you don't know who these people are. It's fine.
They're insofar as this movie has a just like, let's kill the expendable meat sequence. And that's kind of what it is.
Yeah.
Honestly, let's be clear.
Well, and they are expendable, but they are pawns in the game that these 2 women are playing. They're trying to, use these men that have entered the house to play off of one another or to, be protection or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so we've talked about all of this great stuff about the film, but it's neither of us gave it 5 stars. Like, what's knocking it down for you?
I mean, I don't know that anything is knocking it down. I don't believe that movies are entitled to 5 stars.
No, that's fair.
I believe that this movie... I think sort of the way I approach star ratings, every movie is 3 stars, and it then either earns enough to go higher, or it does enough things wrong to go lower.
Yeah, I think that's...
If that makes sense.
That's more or less where I am, too. And I'm an extremely... I'm tight-lipped on 5s and half stars. So I feel that.
I mean, if this film had been in black and white and Swedish, I would have given it 5 stars. To be
good to know. I think for me, the things that are knocking it down, CGI Baby is silly. You do have to swallow it, and that's fine. I think there's a moment where Beatrice Dahl is like lighting a cigarette, and it's doing this kind of like almost Saw movie-esque, like speed ramping, rapid cut, like crazy lady thing. It's a little much.
That was a little much. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I guess it is just a thing of like it worked its way up that much by doing awesome things, and it's not like a perfect film because very few films are.
Like I think to say that this movie about a crazy psycho lady stalking a pregnant woman with scissors because she wants to steal the pregnant woman's unborn baby, for that movie to be at a 4, that movie has achieved something.
Yes.
Like that is a 2-star concept. like I shouldn't say that. It's a great concept, but it's also like
it is a concept that is used by a lot of 2-star filmmakers.
It is a concept that feels like it would lend itself to exploitation and trash. And there is an extent to which this film is exploitation. It's just very, very beautifully shot exploitation. And I do think Beatrice Dahl is superb as the killer. Like, I'm pro Beatrice Dahl. I think she's a good actress. I'm here for whatever she's doing. She is bringing this kind of just feral quality. Like, I feel like she is taking all of her mental energy not to just, like, snarl and tear Sarah apart with her teeth.
Yes. Yeah, it is a visceral, physical performance. But yeah, well, okay, so I feel like Inside is a relatively, it's more complex than it should be, but it's still a relatively simple film, and I feel like we've covered the major things about it.
Yeah, I mean, like that's getting back to what I said. Like, does this movie, if I were a scholar, could I tear into this film's Freudianism? Could I tear into its representation of the body? I could. The movie has on its mind being a home invasion thriller.
Yeah.
And it's a good one. It's among the best home invasion thrillers I think I've ever seen. But the movie's there to give you some thrills and chills. It's not there to, I think, really demand things of you. And this would be something where I do think, going back to other New Extremity films, Martyrs is actually, I think, trying to get it more philosophically. Irreversible certainly is. And that's not to say that those movies are better or worse. It's to say that this movie really is just a machine, and it's a really goddamn good machine.
And that's the type of movie that I kind of revere, like ones that are just really digging into doing the thing that they want to do and just putting every faculty that's available to them to that purpose.
Yeah.
But is there anything that you feel like we've missed in this conversation, or are we wrapping up?
One thing and one thing only that I wanted to touch on, even though I said this film doesn't do the like horror movie violin stings, like when the woman shows up or anything like that, it does a few times when it kind of just needs to make sure that we're kind of facing in the right direction tonally. It has its own version of a sting, but it's not like the kind of American style musical score sting. It's this like hideous staticky burst of like electronic music. It's music. It's like played on a synthesizer or some sort of electronic guitar. I don't know what. But it's just this kind of like squawk.
Yeah.
Like this horrible, nasty noise. And it does it a few times.
Yeah, it's like this, and it's got this kind of staccato undercurrent of like this weird, not quite a drum heartbeat thing with this. Yeah. I think that works well for me to kind of propel those sequences.
I liked it. It kind of ties back into, again, Beatrice Dahl's performance of being just really savage. And that little musical score, it's artless. It's just this ugly little, like, screeching thing that happens. So I like that. I thought it all worked together. Very, very unified object is inside. Yeah,
and I'm so glad you liked it, because I know you have your problems with the new French Extremity as most people do.
I wouldn't call them problems. Like, I don't regret that these films exist. I have Irreversible on my 2000s top 100, which is in itself, I think, a vote of confidence in the new French Extremity. They're not movies that are pleasant to watch. In the same way that I'm never like, hey guys, I'm in the mood to watch Showa. Obviously, totally different register, but like, there are just some movies where it's like, you don't get joy out of them.
Yes.
And this comes as close as I think any film in this movement has come to doing that for me. But I'm still, if I want to watch some folks get cut up, I'm still going to put on a Friday the 13th. I'm not going to put this on. Like, this is way heavier than that.
Oh yeah, like that's there's this is not a popcorn horror movie.
No.
But yeah, I'm glad that it got through to you, because this is one that I've kind of been waving the banner for a long time. I watched it on my own for the first time over a Christmas like 10 years ago, and I was like, holy shit, I need to tell everyone I've ever met about this movie.
I love that. I will say it has definitely encouraged me. The directors, Maureen Bustillo, have not made too many films with like high profiles, and certainly one of those films is Leatherface, and Leatherface can go just suck it. But I do certainly at this point want to see if I can catch up with Livid, which was their second
Yeah, that's
film.
the one that I would say that I've heard the most people say nice things about, but I've not seen it personally.
Okay. Yeah, they according to what I've got in front of me, they have created 6 features, of which I have seen 2, and one of them I thought was really great. And I'm not even going to say that the problem with Leatherface was the directing. The problem with Leatherface was what it was.
Yeah, and I think that you do sometimes have to give a pass to foreign directors making I think that was their first English language feature.
I think it might be their only English language feature.
I think so. But that can be kind of a clusterfuck, so that might not have been their fault.
Yep. Oh, they've made another English language film that was nevertheless a French production.
Oh, okay. What's that
The
one?
Deep House from 2021.
Say that title again.
The Deep House.
Oh, I saw a poster for that. I know nothing about that movie.
It appears to have gone direct to TV in the United States.
Oh. Well, yeah, I'd be curious if you do check out Livid. Let us know on the show. I'd be very curious.
Of course.
But yeah, that does conclude our not quite Christmas month. But next month it's January again. It's gonna be 2023, and yeah, my God. But we're gonna do our new annual thing that we started this January. We're gonna be looking back on the films that we watched in 2022. We're going to be covering sequels or remakes or follow-ups or spiritual whatever. We're kind of just like exploring further, doing further research on films that we've already covered. Like that, I'm over explaining it. But I'm excited.
We're doing sequels to movies we've already
Yes.
seen. It's not a complicated
Exactly. But yeah, so if you're on the Patreon, you can vote for the first movie that we cover for that month. That poll's gonna go up probably, if it's not already up, extremely shortly after this episode airs. And if you're not on the Patreon, you can get on the Patreon. Find Alternate Ending at Patreon, and you can join at any level. You can make Tim watch a movie. You can make me watch a movie. Actually, I think the thing to make Tim watch a movie is full. You can look at the list. You'll find it.
And I'll also, as long as we're talking Patreon, just an additional pitch. I have recently started a new TV series, so you should definitely, if you were not so much into the X-Files, I mean, the X-Files is horror and this is not, but you should check that out as well, because I'm still reviewing TV for our Patreons.
Yes, and has the poll been concluded for what you're going to be reviewing next?
In the future, when this episode is airing, it has. In the present, when we are recording this episode, it has not, and that is why I said a new TV show.
Got it.
Thank you for calling attention to that.
Sorry, when you said a new TV series, I wasn't sure if you were calling the fact that you were reviewing TV a new thing, like a new series that you were doing or not. So
I was being coy because at this point I don't know what I'm reviewing yet.
Yes.
I will say this, and you in the future, listeners, know whether I'm correct or not. I am possibly reviewing both Columbo and Batman the Animated Series.
Excellent. Well, keep an eye out. You can fact check Tim from the past. And yeah, thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you in the new year. Joyeux Noël.
Oh boy, you can't pronounce
I was
French.
trying to be Carrie for that one. Although I was said Joyeux Noël.
That would have been better. Happy New Year, everybody.
Bye.